Yeah, trendsetter, whoa, league of my own, it don't get better. No, read what I wrote, I'm a bestseller. Yeah, reach for my goals, hit it dead center, hit it dead center. Bullseye, hit it the most, is no misses. Something like fish in a barrel, it's no different. Blindfold on me, I still got the most vision. Trendsetter.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Carnivore Evolution. I'm your host, Victoria Olson, and today our guest is Terri Haas, who is a nutrition and carnivore coach and also the author of a cookbook called Terri's Carnivore Treats. And we're very pleased to have Terri on our show today. Hi, Terri. How are you doing?
Hi, Victoria. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. We'd love to hear your story about your carnivore journey, about your coaching, and about your cookbook, and all the ways we can get to know you better on social media.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Well, we're thrilled. We're just thrilled to have you. How did you happen to come across the carnivore diet? And were you a nutrition coach before you discovered carnivore?
I was not a nutrition coach before I discovered carnivore. No, it was I was a carnivore first, and then getting certified as a nutrition coach came after that, a couple of years after that, I believe. So, and I've loved both paths. Forever carnivore.
Wow, that's good to know. Yeah, I feel the same way. Wow. Well, tell us, I know you have a group. It's very active and very interesting too. Lots of information there. Um, how has carnivore helped you in your life? And why did you choose carnivore?
Interestingly, I'm not one that came to carnivore because I had any health issues to resolve or any weight to lose or any of the usual reasons people turn to carnivore. Um, I was doing my studies as a certified health coach, whatever. I was doing my studies, and I think it was very early on, the first or second lecture, maybe, and this was in 2016 or 2017, somewhere in that area, where one of the speakers said in the lecture that said, carbohydrates are non-essential. And I'm like, wait, what? You're meaning to tell me that I don't have to eat these plant foods? And I've never been a big fruit or veggie lover. I'm 59, so even back when I was growing up and stuff like that, there weren't a lot of the same fruits and vegetables that are out now. And you couldn't get them year round, that's for sure, you know. So a lot of the fruits I think I tried mostly as an adult, but as long as I can remember, from a very small age, I've always been a predominantly beef lover and fat lover, and I love dairy. So, and I literally like quit eating plants like the very next day. I had already was eating keto a little bit, so my plant intake wasn't very high to begin with. But, you know, and I probably kept those plants on, if I can remember correctly, just because they tasted good and it was more keto, you know what I mean? So, tomatoes, cucumbers, avocado, onion, that kind of thing. And then I literally was like, I'm never eating those again. You know, I have since backtracked a little bit and I do eat them occasionally, but if you look at my diet over a year, it is 98% carnivore, and I'm overjoyed every single day that I don't have to make any excuses for eating my favorite foods, you know. I was one that like if I was going out for lunch with friends or dinner with family or whatever, that would, you know, I would have my cheeseburger with avocado and bacon on it and take off the bun, take off the lettuce, take off the tomato, and then secretly just kind of say to myself, like, well, you know, if I die at 55 from a heart attack, at least I'm eating my own food, my favorite foods, you know what I mean? So, and then when I jump on this bandwagon and seeing carnivore, and I'm like, I don't think I'm going to die at 55 from a heart attack. I've never had, you know, cholesterol, bad cholesterol, or cholesterol issues or any of that sort of thing. So I thought, well, you know, maybe it just creeps up on you the older you get, you know? But I'm 59, so I'm still going strong and in better shape and feeling better than I have half my age ago.
That's wonderful. Wonderful. So, I would like to know a bit about your coaching experiences and the kind of issues you encounter and have helped people with. So,
Absolutely. I've had a really unique opportunity as actually from being in this migraine group that I'm in. It's a chronic pain migraine group. And the woman that runs it, Angela Stanton, is a researching PhD. And so every day we have just a myriad of questions, obviously, because there's about 20,000 people in the group. So you have some various things that come up. And I mean, she just gets like a little kid in a candy shop, just delighted to be able to research something new and then share and pass on what she's learned. So a lot of the stuff and where I come from is not really the carnivore space per se. It's more just this kind of sheltered migraine group. So a lot of the things that I've learned are very different than what I've seen in more social media carnivore spaces. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do is etch out, just like putting little bits out there that are just a little bit different from what I've learned. And the members in that group, not all of them have migraines. Some of them have just strictly autoimmune issues. There's some people that do want to lose weight. There's also a sister keto group where we have people that have epilepsy and cancer and that sort of thing. So they're doing a more therapeutic and some of them do a nutritional ketogenic diet as well. But mostly over there is a therapeutic ketogenic diet to aid with, not having exogenous glucose, and they follow with a very high fat percentage and that sort of thing. But I've been coaching and helping to teach protocol and helping with meal plans and that sort of thing in my coaching business for about 5 or 6 years, I think. But it's an everyday experience. I volunteer my time every day in the migraine group to help people there just learn it because we're not trying to make money. I don't get a whole lot of hires because we'll help you for free in the group, which is kind of where we like for people to be. But there's just, a certain amount of people that just want to have a coach, want to have it laid out for them, want to have a supportive person that they can just lean on and that sort of thing. So that's where the migraine coaching comes in. And I do get what I call just clients in the wild that just see that, from different interviews and whatnot. And it's not something I really promote. I love doing it, don't get me wrong, but it's just my forte really seems to be these delicious recipes that keep turning out for me, and I don't know how, because this is definitely not my background in any way, shape, or form. I was a stay-at-home mom for, like 28 years, and yes, I was a cook in the kitchen, but I definitely wasn't creating recipes, and they certainly weren't out of the box things that I'd never worked with before like I do now,
wow, that surprises me because I've looked through the cookbook, which I own, and I thought, well, this woman has culinary arts training. It
No.
really occurred to me, and I'm a person who loves cooking at home. I have no training, but I thought I saw that in your recipes. They're really, really very creative.
Thank you.
Um, I want to say advanced, but not in a way that's inaccessible. They're just very, very creative, and I was just so impressed by every single one of them, especially your MSB bread. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was actually my very first um, recipe. And I will say too that these recipes, they've been around for a lot longer than I've had them out in the public
Mm-hmm.
because they really were born out of keeping the people in the group, the members of the group, like interested and in eating a carnivore diet because there's two ways of eating in the group, and one of them is just called protocol proper, which is essentially low carb, high fat, more or less. And then there's a higher protein than fat carnivore diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so all that was just born out of the very first recipe. The MSB stands for modified soul bread because the woman that created it's called soul bread. And it
Mm-hmm.
all started for me back when COVID had shut down the world and I live alone. So I'm all by myself in my own little bubble and with lots of time on our hands, right? And so I was in the mood for a sandwich, but I go on and off eggs, which seems to be kind of common in the carnivore space.
Yeah.
I haven't quite figured out why people do, but I was happened to be off eggs, and I really wanted this sandwich, but the only thing available that I knew about at the time was chaffles. And to me, they just taste like egg waffles. They just were very eggy. And so I thought, I remember being really mopey about it too, like literally going, man, I really want a sandwich, but I just don't want a chaffle, just whining to myself. And so I thought, well, what can you do? So I went ahead and I went on Google, and, like 3 hours later, I kind of came up for air, and I'm like, I didn't really find anything. So I kept digging and kept digging. And then I found this soul bread, and I looked at it, and it was with whey protein powder and eggs and cream cheese, I believe. And one of the tenets and one of the major things about this protocol is that we watch our sodium and potassium, because that's how migraine is caused. It's caused from being taken out of electrolyte balance. So we're all tracking our foods, we're meeting this certain ratio, and it does not behoove us to have something that is really high in sodium. And the bread was high in sodium due to the cream cheese. And then a big bulk of the fat came from olive oil. And I'm like, I bet you this could be carnivorized sometimes. I mean, somehow, because the main component was whey protein powder. And so I went and I actually Googled at the time, because we didn't have ChatGPT back then. Can you substitute butter for olive oil? And I laugh at myself now, because literally olive oil has been subbed for butter in nearly almost all recipes, right? Any kind of oil. So, I said, of course you can. So I'm like, okay, let me try this. And I just remember making this huge loaf of bread, with nobody to share it with, whatever, kind of doing one of these things like, look, it's like, okay, I just get to enjoy it myself, and I mean, I remember taking my first bite. That version with the cream cheese and the whey protein powder tastes a lot like a pound cake. It's just got the exact same kind of mouth feel for that, and the fat feel and that sort of thing. I mean, even the down to the little crackles, whenever you eat a pound cake, I don't know if you can know that, how it crackles in your mouth.
Yeah.
So and I went to Angela, the founder of the group. And at that time, she was very against things that reminded you or very similar to things that we omitted from our diet, because she felt that could be some insulin response to that. And of course, right? So I'm over on my small little piddly personal page, trying to get traction for this bread. And every once in a while, I would kind of tag her and say, what do you think about for the group? And she's like, no, absolutely not, kind of thing. Well, truth be told, there was an incident where somebody was stealing her intellectual property. And so I saw this on TikTok and was like, adamant and kind of just leaving comments like, this is not your property, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, this woman eventually gave credit to Angela. And so while I was in Angela's good graces, I composed this mile-long thing of why my bread should be allowed on the protocol. And by this time, she'd kind of loosened up a little bit, because she'd seen some other recipes that members were sharing. So she allowed it, because she kind of owed me one. And I will say that she is the biggest. She lives on this stuff. She eats it every day. There's not a moment in her house that she doesn't have.
That's a wonderful story. That's so funny.
And say that recipe has morphed, and now, besides using whey protein powder, she came up with one of her own versions that uses milk protein powder. And they're two totally different breads, two totally different textures. And that has been born making farmer's cheese to use in the recipe that's less salt, so we can, even use it more. And I think I just had such success with that first recipe that I went into that with child's mind. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I know now a lot more. In 2025, I know a lot more. But even over the last 2 years, I've learned, because I've had failures that get me so frustrated. I'm like, why is this failing, So not everything turns out, but I had a lot of success in the beginning. I believe my second recipe, possibly, I can't really remember right now, but my second huge hit of a recipe that is I think it's my signature treat besides the MSB, is what I've called carnivore crumbles. And I still to this day look for anything that I can eat them with, bake them with, add them to. They are literally the browned butter bits that get in the bottom of the pan when you brown butter. And they're just those little tiny crumbly bits that you want in every bit of your, brown butter treat or whatever
Mm-hmm.
gives it the flavor. And another deep dark web, dive on the web, and I saw a way that one chef, totally trained chef, was using them as to just add a little bit of flavor to a dish. Well, I took what they were doing and I've just exponentially increased it. So now if you take a brick of Kerrygold butter is what I use, unsalted, and then which is about 227 grams. And I add 250 grams of non-fat milk powder to that, and they just come up and they're like, that's all it is these brown butter bits. And they taste just like graham crackers. They're a little bit nutty. There's no sweetener added, but they definitely taste sweet. And those things I just love. I promote the heck out of those things because people just don't understand what they're missing if they haven't made them. And they're very high in fat, which is great also. And a little goes a long way. So it's not like you're going to overeat and eat the whole entire container full in one sitting. Although you could, but it's a lot of fat. They're really filling.
Wow, I just love these stories. You have more than two recipes in that cookbook.
I
You must
do. Yeah.
have, how do you evolve a recipe? How do you work things through?
Gosh, well, so now I literally look like with having the experience I think I have with the whey protein powders and knowing how they act, also with the non-fat and whole milk powders and stuff, knowing how they act. I think it's just kind of has evolved. And now I literally look at something and say, my first thought is always, how can I carnivorize that? How can that be included in a carnivore diet with the tools and the products that I use, the ingredients that I use? And I have also started with low carb, high fat recipes, which I know people tend to call keto. That isn't like nomenclature that I really use because for me, when I think of a ketogenic diet, I'm thinking of more therapeutic levels, and that's just to me isn't a broad spectrum. So I'll say low carb, high fat, like adding pumpkin to my MSB. So you've got a pumpkin MSB loaf, which definitely isn't carnivore, but it opens up other areas for other people that eat different ways. I've also recently started including allulose and or allulose with monk fruit in some of my recipes, because that also opens up some areas of recipes that taste bland or like don't taste very good without it. Although my intention is to remain true and not use that quite a bit, but let people know that they can add it certainly if they want to. I went through the typical kind of recipes, obviously making my own variation of a carnivore ice cream. Like I love it's a brown butter coffee ice cream. I've probably got 300 recipes that are on my to-do list that I haven't gotten to yet. And there's at least another 150 that I've got out there. So another cookbook in the works. I'd also like to do a low carb, high fat treats cookbook. And I know that my recipes aren't everybody's cup of tea because it seems like, especially in the social media space, carnivore space, that people are really more into an austere type of carnivore diet. And mine, I believe, is geared towards maybe longer term carnivores, ones that don't maybe want to be so austere. And then also they're a great way to bring the whole family into following carnivore if you wish to be more strict. The protocol carnivore diet is one of the more broad ones that I've seen out there, which is what my carnivore eating includes also. So it's like all meats, all seafood, all seaweed, eggs, mushrooms, and dairy. Now, whereas the protocol dairy excludes lactose-free, excludes yogurt, excludes quark and labna and kefir, since that can negatively affect insulin. And like we eat whole meals there. There's no snacking and everything. So I'm very similar in that. After doing it for 10 years, it's just my lifestyle now. So I don't even really look at it, any differently. I guess maybe sometimes I do snack, but it's always in between my two meals. I do timed restricted eating myself and usually get hungry sometime after 2 o'clock always have my biggest meal at that time, making sure I have enough protein so I can hit protein synthesis. And and then maybe if I get hungry and sometime in between that, I'll have some yogurt with the crumbles or whatever, because I have stable insulin, so I can kind of veer off plan. I've been migraine free for 10 years, so I can kind of do what I want, but I still pretty much follow and adhere to a more ketogenic or fat heavy version of the protocol, since I don't need that higher protein anymore. But there's some days that I do higher protein too, and then that just gives me leeway to have some carnivore ice cream later because I need to meet my fat goals.
Mhm. There you go. Wow, that's a wonderful justification for your recipes. I know personally, I'm dairy free if I can help it. I mean, I miss it like crazy, but it has negative impact on me. Um, and I was going to ask you about your daily eating routine. What does a day in the life of Terri Haas look like in terms of eating carnivore?
Well, there is one of my very, very favorite of all time steak meal that I have actually named. Being single, now it can look like I have a boyfriend. His name is Pierre.
This is hilarious.
Over on my Instagram, I'll just have pictures of the steak meal, and I'm like, Pierre and I had a lovely evening. He never disappoints. But it's just it's like almost a half a pound, not quite sometimes, but between like 200 grams, 7 and 8 ounces of hello, what am I trying to say? A filet tenderloin,
Mhm.
and then some sautéed mushrooms and ghee, and then a little bit of Gruyere cheese. That's also really high in leucine. And like for almost 3 years, I ate that daily. Like I would wake up every morning going, I cannot wait to eat that, and then I'd be done with it. I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so glad I ate that. And I'm like, I can't believe I'm going to really want this tomorrow. And I wake up the next morning, I'm like, yep, I'm going to want it again. And then in 2024, I went through egg aversion for the entire year, and also went through, and this was so hard because it literally started at the end of December, but I went through a beef aversion. And so here I'm starting, it's World Carnivore Month, and I'm like, what am I going to post? Because so I lived on posting old reels and old information and that sort of thing, tried to freshen it up. And I really lived for 2 months on my treats themselves, because I just had such a meat aversion. And I've been primarily a beef lover my entire life. Like I have craved beef my whole life, and I have never not given in to those cravings. But so it was really odd for me to not eat eggs and to not eat beef. There was maybe a handful of times in those 2 months that I craved beef, and as soon as I did, like I was on it. I'm like, okay, what are we gonna have, But it really didn't even go down that well. So, and then about October of last year, I finally got back on beef and I got back on eggs, and so Pierre and I are going strong. Now it's just a big hit on my pocketbook. The way that meat prices have gone up, so I kind of temper it there, but I probably could eat it every day. I probably eat that about 3 times a week. And then usually my second meal would be bacon and eggs, or another really one of my favorite recipes is these using the MSB version with milk protein powder, is what I've called carnivore flats. And so they're very thin, and I use them for pizza crusts, and I use them for tortillas and naan and just wraps and everything. And so I keep a stash of those on hand. And I find that, where I was kind of using Egg Life wraps for a bit, for a lot more bang for my buck, as far as, more protein, more fat, more texture. I've been using my flats, and just whip up like a wrap really quick with cheese and meat on it, or a pizza. Like last night I had a chicken chorizo breakfast pizza with some, cheese on there and 2 fried eggs. And that was just like, delicious and easy and quick to make. So it usually just looks like that. I don't drink milk anymore. I've moved that up to half and half. And usually with one of the two meals, I'll have half and half, just to, again, well, because I love it first and foremost, and it just helps wash everything down. But on a leaner meat or a leaner meal, that'll help amp up my fat as well. Or I'll turn to one of my treats.
Wow. That's Yeah, there's certainly a lot of modifications we can make.
Yeah,
And dairy does expand one's diet, and a lot of people can tolerate it.
it does.
Um, I what did I want to ask you about your aversion? Now, did that just I've had the egg issue where it impacted me gastrointestinally,
Hmm.
terrible cramping, and just couldn't stand it, and stopped for 4 months, and then started trying them again, and then it
Hmm.
was gone. So I've seen that. But how did your meat aversion occur to you? And what did you do to replace? Was it all meat or just some meat? What did
It
you
was
switch to?
most meats. It was most meats, like most meats.
Hmm.
Even bacon was not appealing to me, and that, like that's just crazy.
Oh, well, forget it. We're done here. No, I'm sorry.
Hard. Um, I just noticed where you know what, to be honest, what I noticed was it was really hard for me to figure out what I wanted to eat. And that had never happened to me before. Because I mean, like, as much as this gives you food freedom and you don't have to focus on food, and I don't, there's still this of like I said, like, ooh, I can't wait to have Pierre tonight. Oh, I can't wait to have this, or like, a couple days in advance, like I would start getting a craving for a certain type of food or whatever. And so then like all of a sudden, like, yeah, I think I'm gonna have lamb soon because I can have this hankering for lamb, but I don't know when. And you wake up that day and you're like, okay, today's the day I'm having lamb. Not like I'm thinking about it all the time, but just whenever, meal times come around or thinking of what you're gonna have that day, because everything I have is frozen. And I'm not a big air fryer user. I don't know why I'm not, but I'm just not. Even though everybody's steaks and everything looks phenomenal, I'm just not. I need to learn, and so I don't ruin all my meats. But I would have to take things out of the freezer so they would be defrosted by the time for me to eat them, right? So I have to think about that a little bit in the morning. And what I noticed was like none of the meats sounded good. None of them were palatable or anything. And I mean, being a recipe creator and someone that presents that way, I mean, I have enough kitchen gadgets that any sort of meat I could cook a myriad of ways, and none of those things sounded good. So I did live on a lot of whey protein shakes, little bits of this and that. I will say that I kind of went back to grazing during that time, which is no fun at all. I was grazing on carnivore foods, but thinking about food that much, having to prepare food that much, and then also not getting in enough from a meal that I could then wait a few hours or 5 or 6 hours to eat again. So it was really maddening because I'm like, I just feel like I'm back on the standard American diet wheel again here, but there was nothing else I could do. Why I couldn't eat more at one sitting. It was just all not right. And like my egg aversion, the eggs started tasting like metal to me. I mean, so not
Hmm.
like eggs. And the bacon started tasting almost like it was bad. It just didn't taste like bacon. So I just kind of quit everything and withdrew until one day I was like, oh, okay, I'm in the mood for meat, and I would just cook it up. And then it just gradually came back to where now, I mean, that's all by the wayside now. I eat eggs almost every day, and I definitely eat beef almost every day as well. I went through a really strange, so like when I first started carnivore back in 2016, I remember thinking like, oh yeah, and I got a sous vide because I was burning my ribeyes, or they were rare in the middle and burnt on the outside. I'm like, okay, wow, this is crazy. And I think I even, started, even though I didn't like chicken, I bought some chicken and I made chicken once, and I'm like, ugh, I don't want this. And so that's one of my tips to people when they start carnivore is like make sure in the beginning you get all the meats in your diet, because there's going to be a point where those meats, not all of them don't sound very good. At least that was my story. And then earlier this year I went through the weirdest chicken phase. Like I craved chicken like nobody's business. And I'm like, what is up with this? And I mean, there were days that I had only chicken for my two meals. That
Yeah.
is now gone, which I thought was strange when it was here. And then I don't miss the chicken, but I do miss having the extra added variety for, times of when you just are not in the mood. Although, now it's lamb or chicken or eggs and bacon.
Hmm.
Back to the
Yeah.
basics.
It's a very, very common thing I've encountered. I've had my group for about 6 years, and at least once a month, someone comes in and says, "Is anybody else sick and tired of meat and doesn't want to eat it anymore?" It's really common. And I
Yeah.
think that our senses become more acute as we eliminate all those spices that we're used to and
Mhm.
expect. And I think just that the elimination diet itself helps to make us more sensitive to tastes. And in that regard, I wanted to ask you, are you aware of Sally K. Norton's list of spices in terms of oxalate content? She has a blog on that and a chart and tells us and she mostly it's about dried spices, but you can look it up on the internet for raw spices too. But what is your approach to using any kind of seasoning aside from salt?
That was one thing I omitted because my carnivore eating does include spices, as does the protocol. We're we don't really follow anything. I know I'm very familiar with Sally Norton, absolutely. It's not something in the group that is followed much because protocol is a very low oxalate way of eating. And typically, if people come in with oxalate issues, they're already pretty much aware of them for the most part, generally speaking, and they tend to stick to lower oxalate intake themselves. There are some people that don't know about it, and so we kind of just then we will say, hey, if you're not aware, you can track your oxalates in the chronometer is the app we use. And if you are sensitive, first and foremost, move over to carnivore if you're eating low carb, high fat, because that'll remove a great deal of the oxalate. And then just be aware of the spices that you'll be consuming that do have oxalate. Interestingly enough, like I used to put salt and pepper on my eggs. I used to put pepper on like my burgers and all that kind of stuff. And a couple of years ago when and I dropped it. I mean, I just remember one day thinking, I don't really want pepper anymore. And I don't know if it has to do with oxalate or whatever, but I'm just not a fan of it anymore. It's too strong for my palate these days. And I do make my own roast beef. Something I'd never done in my life until just a few years ago. I mean, I would make roasts at home with carrots and potatoes and gravy and stuff like that, but I've never made like a deli style roast beef. And I remember the day that I was making it. So you dry age it in the fridge with some spices over it. And the spices are like rosemary and black pepper. And, there's like 10 spices or something. And I remember while I was crushing up the spices, because, rosemary is kind of like a little twig, right? It's this small thing. And so I wanted to crush it up. And my eyes started to water so bad.
Really?
Yes, and I was like,
Really?
what is that? Because I'd used those spices my whole life. And I was like, what is this? And so I obviously knew it was one of the spices in there, and I took it down to my garage refrigerator where I, put anything that I'm not going to, out of the way up here. And the smell even assaulted my eyes the next day. Like my eyes were burning the rest of the day. And when I woke up the next morning, there was still some lingering spice in the air. And I thought, wow, that's really crazy. So now when I make it, I don't use black pepper, and I've used rosemary, but like a third of the very small amount, and I don't crush it now because, and so far that seems to be good. But like I've just willingly omitted spices that just don't seem like they're going to taste right based on just saying them out loud. You're like, I'm not. So yeah, it's the weirdest thing. So it must have something to do with oxalate inherently,
Oh,
subconsciously.
well, definitely the black pepper has a high oxalate content.
Yes, yes, I'm aware of that one for sure.
Yeah, and but I think Sally recommends using a white pepper, but that's a distinctly different taste to me. But
Ah,
yeah,
okay.
definitely being sensitive to stuff. And you mentioned not using the air fryer, and you mentioned a sous vide. I've come to rely on my sous vide um, because we use it several times a week. And I got rid of my air fryer. One because of some issues about plastics melting inside, and the other was I never really quite got used to using it, and I could never make a steak come out the way I wanted it that way. And I get much more reliable results using the sous vide. So, what methods of cooking do you like to use? What is your preferential treatment?
Actually, my cast iron Dutch
Hmm.
oven I use. And that was like one of my first big carnivore purchases. I think I remember I was so tired of the splatter. And I thought if I could just get something a little bit higher sided, um, it helps, but not that much because the splatter is just
Mhm.
unreal. I do.
Oh, the splatter. Yeah.
Yes, it's horrible. And I wish I'm in a three-story house, and I do have a Blackstone grill, but it's like on the first floor, and my kitchen's on the second floor. So I just don't really use that much. I don't really have much experience with that one either. And then I do use these things called what brand are they? They're called fry walls, and they add like 6 inches silicone around.
Mhm.
So that helps quite a bit. And I'll even put like a one of those splatter flat things on top of that to kind of help whatever. But it's for lack of a better word, the grease is insidious, and you just at some point
Yeah.
just embrace the tallow, embrace the grease, and go, "This is
Yes.
where I'm going now." Put
Yeah,
it on
it's good for your
cross.
skin. Yeah. Just rub it in.
Exactly. So, but my favorite, I mean, Pierre, I cook Pierre in my cast iron. I cook my eggs in an anodized ceramic PFAS free pan. So I don't know if that's the healthiest or not, but I still don't have making eggs in my cast iron down. So um,
Yeah.
um, and then I will say that I've got a ceramic air fryer, and I've also got a glass air fryer, but I use the ceramic one is smaller, and I make my bacon in that because that's just a little bit less mess that I have to clean up. But really, cast iron is my main vehicle that I cook in.
Hold on a minute. I'm having technical difficulties. Okay.
Sure.
Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay.
So definitely cast iron is a little difficult to get used to, and I've always had a hard time with getting the finish on it, even though I usually use an animal fat for
Yep.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I try to avoid the Teflon. Um,
Yes.
I did want to ask you, does Pierre have a French Canadian lumberjack accent, or does he sound like Pepe Le Pew?
He totally sounds like Pepe Le Pew because that's much nicer.
Sorry, I love that idea. I think it's adorable. That's so cute.
He's my boyfriend.
Yeah, really. Oh, it's the language of love is meat. That's
True.
funny. So, how else do you do your coaching? How do you work with your clients? Do you do Zoom meetings? You do things in person? Tell us about that.
I've never met a client in person, even though I have a client that lives about an hour and a half away from me. I live in Houston, down in the city, and she lives about an hour and a half north, which is probably about 50 miles. But in Texas, we measure everything by time because it's so
I'm
huge.
used to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Normally they're on Zoom, but I've done Facebook Messenger, I've done Instagram Messenger, I've done WhatsApp, I've also done phone calls, and even there's a couple people, there's one person that's a celebrity, and I've done just text messages with her. So,
Well, really, yeah. That's cool.
whichever way somebody wants to meet, I'm open to any and all platforms. Just, the fact that they've reached out to me, I feel honored that they even
Mhm.
selected me or were interested. So I can definitely make any sort of way to happen to meet.
Sounds great. I want to get your opinion on some of the things that have come up lately in the carnivore community that
Mhm.
have created some controversy, like the GLP-1 shots and the sugar diet. So what is your take on those two topics specifically?
So the GLP-1, um, knowing what I know, even though I didn't take any of these medications, but like from the migraine group, just knowing big pharma and all the medications that migraineurs typically are put on, um, I always hesitate to think there can't be anything magical out there, especially at this stage of the game, right? Um, what really I say to people, because I don't think a lot of people know that allulose is something you can use in place for GLP-1, right? So
Mhm.
like it literally is nature's Ozempic. And so I will kind of get that across and say, if you want to lose weight, then eat something, eat one of my treats with allulose added, or even sprinkle some allulose on your food before you eat it, or take a teaspoon of allulose before you eat, and that'll block some of the fructose and glucose. So, I'm not pro medication for losing weight, especially knowing how eating carnivore can help you with insulin resistance, and also knowing that there's no such thing as a quick fix. I mean, you can't lose weight safely and healthily quickly. It just doesn't work that way. And then the sugar diet. That one I just kind of have to laugh, even though I've heard some, I'm just going to say, preposterous stories. I mean, yes, in the short term, could lose some weight that way, but at the total expense of your liver and possibly your pancreas. I mean, when you hear that fruit juice is part of a particular way of eating, the only thing that I see is non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's all that flashes in front of me, is just non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So, I just don't see how that can be beneficial towards anybody. And then also knowing what I know, because I used to suffer from hypoglycemia. That's one thing that the carnivore diet has helped me with. Now I have even blood sugar and stable insulin. And someone suggesting to add sugar to your diet, I mean, I have eaten off plan, and boy, when I eat something that's got sugar in it, hello, hypoglycemia. And so I just know that, I mean, insulin is pretty much the same across the board for all humans. And so if I'm experiencing that, certainly you will be too at some point. So I just feel that that's a detrimental in more ways than one way to obtain a weight goal.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you there. And you had mentioned in passing a chronometer, and I'm a fan of tracking. I use Carb Manager. Give us your outlook on using a tracking app, and to what end?
So that's really funny. When I first joined that migraine group, it was a pretty broad protocol at the time. Like, we still were eating, or allowed to eat, like sprouted grain breads and starches like green beans and peas and that sort of thing. I myself, I think truly, because I remained fat heavy, or whole fat, I should say, full fat, and was pretty heavy on beef and dairy. But I never used salt, and I was drinking way too much water for my weight. And so I cut my water in half and I started adding salt, and I've literally been migraine free since the get-go. I have not had one migraine since I found that protocol in June of 2015. As it evolved, one of the other admins was really adamant about needing to track. And I was just like, I'm not going to track. I mean, I'm migraine free. What do I care? Well, then it became more streamlined, and members were kind of, suggested to track, because without tracking, you don't know what's going in. And I remember when I first started tracking, and I did it for the morale of the group and to be part of the group and whatnot. And then also being a coach for teaching the protocol, and obviously meal planning and that sort of thing, I needed to learn how to do it. So we initially did use Carb Manager, because that was one of the better ones. And then as the protocol evolved over the next couple of years, like, we track things. We don't track too much, but one of the things that we're really particular about is tracking leucine. And without having adequate leucine in a meal, you will not gain protein synthesis. And like, for those that are on protocol carnivore diet, meeting their leucine needs in every meal is required. Now, if you're following the low carb, high fat, it's just with one meal. So Carb Manager doesn't track that as easily as Chronometer does. So we've now moved to Chronometer, and I like it. I mean, I found for myself when I first started tracking that I was not eating enough fat. And that left me somewhat hypoglycemic, because I was fat adapted and I needed that to
Yes.
sustain me, So, and now just recognizing all the symptoms, I can tell also, now that I've been doing it so long, I already know what meal is not going to provide enough fat for me, and how I'll, augment that later on after the meal or with the meal or whatever. But I can tend to feel what feels like the beginnings of hypoglycemia. My vision will kind of go out peripherally. I'll maybe feel a little bit more lethargic, or I'll be hungry and I'm like, what am I? Oh, I didn't have enough fat. So I would just take, I'm not a butter muncher. I've never been, I love butter, don't get me wrong, but I'm not one to just snack on butter or eat butter with my meals. But I have been known to go chug heavy cream, which is, a precursor to butter, right? So because it's like, oh my gosh, I need 50 grams of fat or 30 grams of fat or whatever. So I'm like, look, 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 and weighing that.
Hello. Yeah.
And that's
Mhm.
not so fun to do that, really. I mean, as fun as that
No.
may sound, it's really not fun.
Mhm.
The mouthfeel of heavy cream is a lot. It's greasy. Maybe I should try
Gosh, really.
butter.
Tell me more, please, about leucine and protein synthesis. I can speak. And what sources you can have that are non-dairy for leucine. Where are you finding leucine?
Okay, so leucine's going to be found in all animal foods, with the exception of like butter or cream, because it's just pure fat, right? And tallow, I should say, too. Lard, schmaltz, all those fats. But your best source of leucine is going to be in whole, unprocessed meats. And I've got a really quick reel on in my highlights on my Instagram, kind of just showing, how to meet your leucine threshold. So at around age 35, one's leucine needs start at about 3 grams. And this is something that Chronometer will track for you. Even if you have the free version, it will track for you. And the older you are and the less active you are. So if you're like 20 and not very active, or if you're over 35, then your leucine needs are going to be a little bit higher. And leucine is the amino acid that is the signaling amino acid to start protein synthesis. So if there is not a lot of leucine in your meal, or if there's not a lot of leucine in your food, animal leucine, then you will not start protein synthesis, which is the action of healing at the mitochondrial level. That's the action that actually allows for healing and repair. Your foods will be used as glucose, as fuel, rather than go towards repair. So it's a fine line. Like, so there's some people that do want to lose weight eating carnivore, and they're going to be better off following a higher fat to lower protein model macros than a higher protein and a lower fat. And it just depends on what you want. You can lose weight, but it will be at the expense of repairing the mitochondria. But at some point, if you're fasting and that sort of thing, you're going to have autophagy that happens, and so you're going to have some healing and repair in that regard, or cleaning of the house, I should say. So it's a lot more on the technical side of things that you don't really see a lot of in the social media spaces, but it's definitely part of that unique opportunity that I have being underneath Angela, who's this researching PhD. I know more about things that I don't need to know about. And that can really confuse people. And I have a daily story that I do that's hashtag PSA. It actually stands, I like for it to stand for like public shit posting announcement, just because so
No.
many messages with people that say that's not true, or that's not how it works, or then I'm like, I'm here just to really bring the truths as I know it, and I'm glad that it's opening up discussions, because a lot of stuff, there's a lot of misinformation, and I'm not saying I'm always right either, and I'm very much open to feedback and correcting when I'm wrong, but I'm just kind of trying to share things that I've seen from this other side, so that other people can get a different point of view and maybe ask different questions, and lead them down for more information, more knowledge.
Yes, we're always evolving that way. I could really relate to that very much. So, yeah,
Yes.
and learning as we go. Carnivore has not been around that long,
Okay.
even if 10 years. I'm a seventh year carnivore, and
Mhm.
I'm learning things. I certainly learned about leucine today. Thank you very much. I
You're
had no
welcome.
awareness of that whatsoever. And it's just been wonderful talking to you and hearing. It's been lots of fun, you
Thank
and
you.
Pierre. Send him my regards, please.
But we're in an open relationship too, so he's free. He's free for
Yeah, really?
free.
I might cook something up with him sometime, but don't tell my husband, who's here in the room, by the way,
Keep your secrets on
listening.
for sure.
It's too funny, 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 funny. Well, we're really thrilled to have had you here and to talk to you about everything you've been doing to promote the carnivore lifestyle and within the carnivore community. And I
Thank,
hope we see more of you around. We
much
certainly will share your links and your contact information.
thank you.
Is
Thanks
there
very much.
anything else? Our pleasure. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
I don't think so. You asked some really good questions, and I felt like I talked the whole time, so that always signals a pretty good interview when the
I
interviewee.
think so. I think so. Very, very enjoyable to hear from you and very happy to meet you.
Nice
That's
to meet
great.
you too. Have a great rest of your day and take care.
Well, thank you. You too, dear. Take
Thanks.
care. Bye bye.